I feel that technology enhanced the course that I offered um, primarily through the student engagement, the level of student engagement. Um, Students were able to access the information that I was giving them in multiple methods and multiple avenues. So, for example, instead of just reading information or in a face-to-face environment, me giving them information and kind of setting up the class, in an online environment, they proceeded through weekly modules. The modules were set up so that they could access the content in a variety of different ways. I gave them podcasts to listen to, graphic organizers to analyze, of course, text readings and links, 3D model demonstrations where they could kind of look at how the brain operates. A lot of video was embedded where they got to learn about the brain or survivors' stories. So I feel that because it was so multifaceted, and I hadn't done that previously in a face-to-face class, their level of engagement was it surpassed my expectations. I also felt that when they were showing me what they were understanding, that I gave them multiple methods of demonstration. They got to choose how they wanted to demonstrate their learning via technology. They could videotape themselves, they could formulate graphic organizers, they could provide presentations like Prezi or PowerPoint or Keynote, they could submit charts and diagrams. So that was where technology was beneficial and how they accessed, made sense of the content, and then showed me what they ultimately learned or understood from the course. Sometimes I set them up where they would have choice assignments and they could choose any of the method to demonstrate their learning. Other times I gave them, one or two options of how they could show me what they knew or show me their new learnings. It depended on the assignment. Sometimes when they finished an assignment, it was to me only. More often, though, it was to partners or small groups or to the whole group. Well, that's also one of the primary benefits of making this class online is that in a typical classroom face-to-face setting, you have, the students, same set of students who are offering their ideas and volunteering their information and participating in class. You have a lot of students who are just listeners. Some of them could be even passive, not even engaged, but we don't know how to actually gauge that. In an online environment, you force them to be engaged because they're accountable to their partner, or they're accountable to their small group, or they're accountable to the whole group or to me. And I teach teachers how to teach, and I already know that the data shows that if a student has to show their work to their peer group, the level increases, the quality of their work increases as compared to if they just have to show their work to one person, their professor or their teacher. So I embedded that idea into the online format, or the online format of the class. I could tell you how it impacted student learning on a weekly basis, as well as the course outcomes, like at the end of the course. On a weekly basis, the journals, the blogs, the discussion boards, the case studies, all the assignments that came in on a weekly basis, as I'm reviewing those, I clearly could tell that their thoughts they had thought-provoking answers. They were grappling with issues at a deeper level. They were making meaning in a deeper manner compared to my face-to-face class that I've taught it a few times so far. And so right away I knew I would say probably by week 2, wow, I'm actually seeing them all learn at that level, as compared to in a face-to-face class, I see 1 or 2 at that level, and I'm trying to kind of wrap my arms around the rest of the group to get them to that level. In terms of the final outcomes, we have a signature assignment. It's a culminating assignment that takes all the learnings that happen during the course, and and it's an applied type of presentation or applied assignment, and that was at a deeper level. They really understood the main concepts. They were more reflective in their answers. I was learning from them. That was what was really cool. I was an active participant because on a weekly basis, I was learning from their questions and their posts and their answers. Whereas in a face-to-face, I'm not sure if that happens to that degree. Absolutely. I feel that if I taught the class again as a face-to-face option, undoubtedly my face-to-face class would look different, and I would structure it and develop it differently based on my participation in the online class version. My favorite technology tool for myself was just simple YouTube. I bring in brain injury survivors into my face-to-face class. They talk about their injury. They talk about rehabilitation and recovery. This is a key component of the class because this is where brain injury becomes alive to my students. And so doing that in an online environment, I wanted to keep that. And so what I did is I would just meet with my the brain injury survivors, videotape my interview session with them, upload it, have my students watch the video, post a wall where they had to ask questions to the survivor, just personal questions, something that intrigued them. They get to see one another's questions, and then I meet with the survivor again, go over the wall with them while I'm videotaping this. And in what I would say real time, they get to see that brain injury survivor try to sort out their thoughts and try to answer the questions given the deficits in language and communication and cognition that have occurred because of the brain injury. It was a perfect avenue for them to actually see how injury impacts someone's just skills, social skills, behavior, attention, concentration, language. And then after that, I had my students write a response. So it was just a YouTube. It was so simple, yet it captured everything that I'd want it to capture. My favorite tool for the students to use throughout the course was something called Scribble. It's an online tool that gave my students the ability to capture information off of whatever. It could be a document, a PDF, a web page. It could be part of their digital reader that I set up for them to instead of a textbook. Anything that they could see on their computer screen, they could highlight, capture it, and place it somewhere else. And what I asked them to do is create a database of strategies, adaptations, modifications that we would use with students that have brain injuries related to concentration, attention, organization, executive functioning, whatever, across a broad domain of skills. What would we do? And that allowed the Scribble tool, on a week-to-week basis when we were covering these different areas, to capture things that were important enough for them to save in a database, and then at the end of the semester to turn in that database. In a real face-to-face course, my students come in with a big, gigantic binder full of papers that they highlight or mark. It's a lot, and so that was their way of sifting through it but they turn in a big bulky binder. The Scribble application has been just so useful for everybody to kind of sort out what they think is the best tool to use or the best idea to use with their students, taking information and capturing it off of a page. I would say the time that it took, the investment to develop the class, I underestimated how much time it would take. And I love teaching. I love the course. I wanted to make sure my students were going to get the full range that the course offers. But to do that, it took a lot of time. And so that was challenging. It was worthy of the investment, but it was challenging. I think during the course, probably the most challenging thing for me was to make certain that I was giving adequate, helpful, effective feedback to my students on the work that I was asking them to submit. Making sure I stayed connected with them, and I put a lot of effort into that by iMessaging them, text messaging, emailing, phone calling, writing comments on their documents and sending them back, writing notes in their grade center. I was making sure that they knew me as a person. And my reward in teaching is contingent upon that connection. And so it was a challenge just to make sure I was doing that. In a face-to-face environment, you have your students come to you, you get to talk to them, and you're connecting to them. But I had the idea in my mind before teaching the class that I would probably be just sitting in front of a computer screen, kind of checking in and grading papers. I didn't want that. I didn't want that to happen. And so a challenge was trying to figure out how I could stay connected routinely and consistently with each student so that they felt that I was there with them. I know I was successful. I felt, it sounds strange probably to some people who haven't taught in this environment with the hold. I would say I attribute a lot of it to the hold class and what Donna and Katie were helping me do in the design. I felt that in some ways I had more of a connection with my online students than I've had in a face-to-face class. And I think it's because the intention I had behind it to make sure I did that on an individual basis. I was aware of that. And whereas in a face-to-face class, I'm not thinking so much of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I spent more time thinking and preventing the disconnect that could happen. And that, again, will change the way I teach face-to-face. I will bring in text messaging, instant messaging, and a lot more weekly tools on an individual basis with my face-to-face students that I did in the online environment, because prior to this, I didn't text message individual students just to check in on them. I check in via e-class, and that's about it. Or I assume they're going to come to me in my office hours if they need help or they don't understand something. I had 16 students take the class. I'm teaching it again, and I have 23.
And you're teaching it again online?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
I'm excited
this
to.
semester?
To get it ready the second time, I've changed a few things. I've edited a couple of assignments, but not much. So the time I invested to develop the course has paid off, because I have felt that a good majority of what was there is effective and going to be continued in this next round. Well, I think one important thing about the process and of teaching this class online was that I was asked to do one of my classes or to develop one of my classes as an online class, and I was a skeptic. My satisfaction in my job is wrapped up in that connection I have with my students. I felt similarly that their performance was contingent on the interaction, face-to-face interaction they'd have with me. I thought that they needed to be with me in a class, and I could control the class environment such that they would be able to gain understanding, and get to the end point that I wanted them to get to based on the course outcomes and course learning objectives. I was skeptic. I was thinking, like I said before, that I would be sitting in the back of, or in my office in front of a computer and kind of bored. I cannot tell you how much or how wrong of a perspective that is based on my experience. I felt that I was an active participant in the class. And like I said before, I was learning from them. My understandings were stretched, and I'm not sure if they've been stretched to that degree or in that way before. I felt connected with most, if not all, of my students in a manner that I don't usually say. Maybe 1, 2, 5, 6 in a face-to-face, and then the others I know, but not so well. And in this class, I got to read their thoughts. I got to contribute my thoughts to their thoughts. I mean, layer after layer, week after week. So it was a very good experience, and it was much more effective than I had ever thought it could be.